I'm back. Well, I'm using the cheap camera today. My good camera is somewhere else, and I didn't bring it home. So we've got this one. I don't know where it'll come out, but it should be okay. In any case, if it isn't, who cares? What we'll be looking at. Yeah, the Mesa Boogie Dual Rectifier 100 watt head multi-watt version. Well, I've always been into Mesa Boogie somehow. It goes back a fair way with my sort of guitar experience. My first one was a Mark III, and that was sometime in the 80s, I think it was. And anyway, I got rid of that and I bought a Mark IV, because I'm like that. But then I got rid of the Mark IV and I bought a tri-axis and a 290 power amp, stereo power amp. Yeah, that was an experience, and you could cover so many things with that particular piece of gear that even on my website today, you'll find it down below, by the way, lots of information in the text. You can still download those presets today that I and all the guys did, and yeah, can be very useful, especially if you've got one of those plugins that can actually read in the settings that I used to use and the other guys. My first experience with a real dual rectifier was over in America. I walked into this guitar centre and I saw it. There it was ahead of me, and I'm thinking, oh, that's something new. And I plugged it in and I couldn't unplug. I was sitting in there for hours playing this amp, and it was such a change compared to anything that I'd used previously. Later down that road I bought two 150 watt triple rectifiers, and believe me, they can be loud, but they're a little bit picky on the tone. I never really did have a true dual rectifier, although I had a Road King and I also had a Mark V head. But enough about all of that. Let's look back at this. This is a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier 100 watt head multi-watt, and this one was made sometime at the end of 2019 in production in America. By the time it's been through the distributor stock and the rest of it and it's been sold, well, here we are in 2021. And I do know that it was bought a little bit earlier in 2021. Now, I did buy this one from a guy named Scott, who, what had happened is he had some problem, some health problem, and within a month he decided he was going to sell it. So I bought it from him, and yeah, a month old. Yeah, what can you say? Anyway, let's hope Scott gets better. Now, some of you'll know that I had recently, it's down there in the text, a triple rectifier, 150 watt triple rectifier that I sort of recuperated and brought back to life properly. Did a upgrade from 120 volts to 240 volts. I did a complete retube. It had got a bias mod on it and things like that, and I also had one or two problems with changing channels and that sort of stuff. But anyway, all that was resolved in the end, one way or another. And it's different than this one. The problems that were existent on that amplifier probably will never appear on this amplifier because it changes inside. And we're going to do an inside and outside review right now, and I'm going to show you the differences on a multi-watt amp compared to the earlier triple and dual Rex that I think they stopped in about 2010 or 11, something like that. So those older ones are about 10 years old, but of course these aren't hanging on trees by the hour unless you go and buy a brand new one. And of course with the new Badlander amp, well, would you buy one of these? Well, we'll save that question for later. So let's get down and dirty and take a look at this one. I'm going to whip the chassis out of the case so we can come down and have a look inside. I can't wait, can you? Okay, well, here's the external chassis, and I'm going to do a quick run over the top of it. We'll take this thing off and have a gander at what's going on. Okay, well, there's a bit of an overall view of the chassis. It's a very wide chassis. It reminds me a lot of the old Marshall 1959s. Really, it's that wide, yeah. So let's go down and have a look at this end and work our way across, which looks like the obvious plan to me. Well, the most obvious thing is this big giant Mesa Boogie power transformer, and this is part number 561143, and then it's got some other numbers underneath which you can probably read yourself. Now the thing is, if you've got one of the earlier rectifiers, they've stopped making the power transformer for those, and they'll sell you one of these just in case you ever have a problem and you've got one of the earlier ones. And this is dated something like the 17th of the 6th 2019 at Mesa. So yeah, well, it's getting on for a couple of years old now. It's literally been played for a month and was brand new when it was bought. Next up in my book is the Mesa Boogie choke, which is a Mesa 550381. Got a couple of numbers underneath it. And then we move along to these two first tubes, which any of you will know if you know anything about Mesas. Those are the two rectifier tubes. And these particular ones are 5U4GBs, and those are the newer ones that they fit in the dual and triple rec, I believe. Next up, there's a quadruple of 6L6GCs, STR 440s, and on the older models they were 430s, I think, or even 420s, if I remember right. Now behind all of that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tubes. One of them will be a pi tube and the others will highly likely be preamp tubes. And my guess is they'll all be the same as this one, whatever it may be. Let's take a look. This is a 12AX7A. It's a Mesa Boogie tube, and it's exactly what you'd expect. And you will notice on the shroud that there's like a rubber ring at the bottom. And I can tell you, if you've got an older Mesa Boogie rectifier, what happens with these is they basically rot off. So while those things at the bottom, the little rubbers, seem a good idea to stop these rattling, I suppose they would. Yeah, over the years they do deteriorate and they can end up not being very good. I had to hunt around to try and find some replacements, although I suppose Mesa would supply them. Yeah, I got mine off eBay. Now last but not least is this big fat Mesa output transformer, and this is 562105 by the looks of that. Got some other numbers underneath, but I wouldn't worry. Made in the USA, it proudly says. I wonder if it really is. I guess it probably is. Anyway, there it is, big fat output transformer. And for those guys that don't have much of a clue, but they like to look inside these things, the output transformer normally, not always, normally is pretty near the outputs. So let's flip this thing over and take a look at what's going on inside. I know that it's an interesting view. Well, there it is, inside the dual rectifier from Mesa Boogie, the multi-watt version, made in 2019. If you were buying one today, my guess is it's probably pretty much like this one. By the way, this is a UK one, and we're going to cover some of that and some of the other changes that have gone on inside this amp, as well as taking a sort of general look at what's inside here. And you know, whether you're a technical guy or not, well, if you're technical you probably know more than I do about tube amps, but the fact is I don't really do the reviews in this way for that. It's more a question of taking a look for quality and component quality and things like that, you know. I'm looking for bodges that might have gone on in some amps, and I had bought one not a million years ago that was an absolute, well, I won't use the wrong word, it was, well, horrible. You would never have bought it yourself, and I sent it back. It's the first amp I've ever sent back ever since I've been involved in playing guitar since 1970. So that really should tell you an awful lot about what's out there. There are some really great amps, and there are some absolutely awful amplifiers. Some of them are going under the names that you know and have been hyped right through the floor, and everybody's saying, oh, these are great, these are this, these are that. Well, no, they're not. They're not great, they're not this, they're not that, they're just overpriced. In my opinion, junk. Anyway, enough of that. Let's go and have a look at this amp, because this amp is absolutely first class. Okay, so I want to focus on this little section for just a short while. This is the power transformer, and mains comes in up there somewhere into the transformer after the switches and all the rest of it, and then here are the outputs, all these across here, and you can see that this is a multi-voltage amplifier. Now if you've got a 120 volt Mesa, you won't find all these wires. You'll probably find 2 or 3 connected. Well, in fact, I know you'll find 2 or 3 connected, because that's all that come out. Mesa don't supply generally a transformer like this unless the amp's an international amplifier, as this one is. So if you buy a 120 watt version, you mark my words, you will be buying another power transformer if you want to convert it. But along with that, there are other things that you have to do, one of which is to change these MOVs up here for higher powered ones. If you're coming from 120, you have to fit these little capacitors and the rest of it. I won't bore you too much, but that's an important aspect of if you're going to think you're going to do a 240 volt conversion and just by connecting another wire, because you're not. But as you can see on this one, the quality is first rate. It's all clipped, all the wires are bent as they should be. You know, somebody spent time on this thing, and that's one of the things. They've spent time doing it. It's not been thrown together like, well, no, I won't tell you who, but it hasn't been thrown together like some companies that have third-party companies making their amps for them. Oh, and by the way, some of those are USA companies that get them made. Now I've moved along just a little bit. There's a power transformer over there, and we can see these capacitors, which are typical Mesa capacitors. This is where they stuff them, and this is how they fit them, and I don't see many of these going wrong. I mean, even in the triple rectifier that I reconditioned, so to speak, those capacitors were absolutely perfect. And funny enough, when I was checking these other ones, this type, you'll see them here, I didn't have any that had a problem. No, not one. I didn't have to change out one, which says a lot. But I do know that these can fail, this type. I know them can fail as well, but it seems that they don't fail very often. Oh, and that says 7th of the 5th, 19, ER. He knows who he is. Welcome to your amp. And just before we carry on this way, I don't know whether you noticed this, but that board over there, you can see it here. It extends to here. That's the board that holds the tube rectifiers on it, and where the power goes through and all the rest. So it comes in there and it comes back out. Yeah, it's a separate board. So if you get any problems, you can either buy a board off them if they've got one, or if they'll sell it here, or if. But none of that, well, then you can repair that board, can't you? Because it's not like having to repair this whole thing, is it? Coming further back along, you can see across the top here, we've got a sort of daughter board. And that's always a good idea. It's always something I like to see, because once again, a bit like that board, you can whip it out and repair it. Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? But a lot of people won't do that. They'll have one big giant board And the one big giant board is one big giant problem usually. Fender will tell you about it sometimes. Below that, we've got this other little board down here, in there. Now that board has the power tubes on it, so that's a power tube board, and it's got some resistors that you typically see on most amps, but they fit across a sort of gap in the PCB in there. If you see anything going wrong with them, it's easy to see. Let's put it that way. Below that is the main board. And before we look at the main board any further, look at the connections down below here for the controls on the front. They're always pretty nicely put together actually. Not perfect, because it's a commercial product and they sort of throw things around a bit when amps are being made. But you can see that there's really care has been taken with all of this. And that's, like I said earlier, that's one of the things you're paying for. Somebody's cared about making this amp the best it can be for you. Yeah. This is in an area where most people would never bother opening up and looking. And they still do this in a very nice way. It says a lot, doesn't it? So let's come back to the main motherboard. Well, I say main board, it's a preamp board really, if you think about it, because here are the preamp tubes. Okay, there's another 3, 4, and we can just about see the 5th one at the end there. I'm going to move a bit that way later and show you something else that's actually quite important on this amp, and it's a big improvement and change. You'll also notice when you look at this that there's lots of these little relays around. Now there's always been lots of relays around, but there's also been usually lots of, where can I show you one? Let's have a look. Lots of them things there, if you can just about see that one there. They're like a little transistor or switching device. Don't worry about what the proper name is, it doesn't really matter. There's a better one there if you can see it, if you can see that. But there's an awful lot less of those in this amp than there is in the earlier one, the one that ceased to be after 2010. So that's worth noting, because if you get channel switching problems or popping when you're changing channel, it usually relates to that type of circuitry. On this one, a lot of things have changed. As I said, well, I'm pretty sure there are far more relays than there used to be. But there's also another change going on as well. All the components are really pretty spot on components. They're not junk. You can tell they're not junk. These things here are what they've been fitting to Mesa Boogie amps for year after year after year. And even in 2010, those were basically the same sort of socket. Whether they're the best socket in the world or not, you could argue, you could, raise points about that. But they don't seem to fail very often. And having those power tubes on a separate board like that also helps. Now some people will say, yeah, but they're mounted to the PCB. Well, they are, but they sort of raised off a little bit, I think. Yeah, they are raised off just a little bit. That's the power tube board, but heat goes up, not down. And while you might have some of the pins warming up a bit, I doubt they're going to be anything cooking like in a PV Mace. Anybody remember one of them? Well, I had a PV Mace which was 160 watts, and they mounted something like that upside down in the amp, so the tubes were a bit like a Fender, upside down. And I wouldn't say it cooked that board, that's the wrong word. It was more disintegrated it. It was unbelievably bad. PV Mace. So if you've got one, go and have a look at that board, because I tell you now, I could almost guarantee if you've used the amp, that's cooked. Like I mentioned a bit earlier, isn't it nice to see somebody actually date it and put his initials on and things like that? You don't get this in Chinese rubbish, do you? You just don't get it. What you get here is, I keep coming back to this, the quality and the care that somebody's taken in putting this amp together. Now I do specifically want to spend time looking at this area here, because that chip that's there is the chip that's responsible for changing the channels in the amp. A bit like on the triple rectifier that I did previously, and is down in the text for you to go and watch. This is sort of very similar up to that chip there, and maybe what's above it. Well, it's sort of similar, let's put it that way round. Signal comes down into this board, and on the old board, as you can clearly see now, there are loads of these little, I think they're called FETs, going across here. You can see them. But you can see there's a pile of them across there, and lots of them spread all over the board. And the fact is that those things fail. And if you come back to this dual rec, you can see, and this is a 3-channel dual rec, by the way, you can see there's virtually none of these FETs, but there is loads of these relays, and to me that says a lot. Well, it says everything. Look at these relays. It says everything. It says we had a problem on the earlier amps and we're going to fix it. So I guess in about 2010 or thereabouts they fixed it. So if you can get a multi-watt amp like this, the chances of you having maybe excessive noise when you change channels, or if you get problems with just even changing channels, I think that will have been massively reduced from where it used to be. All because they've spent the time to rework this board. There's no doubt about it, it's been reworked. And just as you can see there, although it says copyright 2000, the fact is it says there also Mesa Rectifier 5. So this is revision 5. And you know they went through, on the older one, they were in revision A, B, C, D, E, F and G. And then they probably moved on to 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And this is 5, so it's probably the last one of this type. Unless they're going to carry on making this thing, they might. But with the Badlander appearing, I'm not so sure that they will carry on with this. But there's more about that later. And just for your own info, just so I can show you that, there are the one of the resistors for the power tubes, and you can see how they mount it. It's very common. I've seen that quite a lot in more recent times. I just wanted to show you part of the backboard. You can see that they sort of mounted on the board are these sockets. This one here is for switching the channels. This is where you plug the pedal in at the back. And isn't it nice, like I said, to see this quality along here, you know, and the time they've spent doing it. I'm all for this stuff, and I like to keep showing it because it's what you're paying for. It's all good stuff, yeah, all very nice, exactly how you'd really want your amp to be. And oh, you didn't want it to be like this. Maybe you wanted it like one of them others that I saw, you know, made by a third party. I can assure you wouldn't. I just want to draw your attention to the chassis as well. You look at the welding down here. You can see what high quality that is. This chassis seems almost like alloy to me. I could be wrong. It could be steel, but it's a bit. I haven't got a magnet kicking around, so whatever it is, in any case, makes little difference when you've got the quality of the joint like this, compared to the quality of the joint that I saw on a Fractal Audio simulator some years back, which was like pigeon manure. This is the real deal. This is very much very similar to what I'd expect to see on Marshall, and Marshall never ever fail on that. Okay, what we're going to do is take a look across the back of the amp, and by the way, if you hear any funny noises, it's a pigeon on the roof that's making some of them pigeon noises that go on. So no, it's not me cooing at the amp. Anyway, here we go. What we've got far left hand side here is slave out. If we want to go to another power amp, we've got a control for that. All very nice. We've got the output for the speakers, which covers 16 ohm, 8 ohm, 8 ohm, 4 ohms and 4 ohms. Now, there's usually an extensive section in the manual for this bit of the, you know, the setting up. You know, different combinations of speakers and that sort of thing. There's a lot of it. But the other thing that matters here, it's a dual rectifier. It's a registered trademark by the look of that. 100 watt head, all tube amp, made in Petaluma, California, with the world's finest materials, and they are good quality, like I've always said. There's some patent numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4 patent numbers covering this device, so they spent the time and they're the inventors of the stuff, so what more could you ask on that? Now then, we're in the section of the FX loop. Now the FX loop on a Mesa Boogie triple rectifier, and I think the dual rectifier was either similar or the same, was a right pain, and I believe that it's been fixed on this one, on this later model, this multi-watt amp. I haven't tried it, honestly. I will do, but, well, we'll be trying it, won't we? Well, what we've got is we've got a detent in the middle of this one, which is a send. There's your send, the centre detent. So we've got a left and a right for that, plus or minus, good. We've got a return here, and there's no adjustment for return because that's on the equipment that you're using, isn't it? Isn't it? Of course it is. Yeah, we've got this loop select here, so we can say loop on. We can have the loop on channel 1 or just channel 2 or just channel 3. We can switch the loop on and off via this foot switch, or we can bypass the loop altogether. Now that switch there is probably very similar to the old design, but I do believe it's changed from where it was. If I remember right, the old one was a parallel loop. Don't correct me if I'm wrong. I just know that there were problems with this, and I spent time on that years ago. Moving along a bit further, we've got a manual channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, or foot switch select for the channels. So that sets them manually, one at a time. Or you can put your foot switch down in the bottom here, which goes across to that chip that we looked at, and that'll flip the channels. And remember, this is a 3-channel head. Now, one of the frustrating things to me, just trust me, it is very frustrating, is this rubbish here. And some people will say to me, oh yeah, Tony, but it's brilliant. You can this and you can that. Well, I know what you can do with it, but wouldn't it be nicer just to have a little MIDI, a MIDI connector on here, and get rid of all this junk that you've got across here and has been for years, and was on the Mark IVs and I think on the Mark IIIs and half a dozen of the other tube amps that I've had. And Mesa aren't alone, but they're the biggest protagonist of this excuse for external switching. It's horrible. Anyway, let's run through it. You've got a tuner out, so you can connect your tuner to there if you want to be doing that. We've got a channel 2, a channel 3, a solo and a loop. So external switch the loop, turn the solo in. We've got controls at the front for that. You'll see about them in a moment. Channel 3, channel 2, and if neither of those are on, well, you get channel 1. Fancy that? That's one way of working, isn't it? Oh well, now we're on the last section of the back. Thank God for that. We've got a bias select here. Well, as you saw inside the amp, there is no bias adjustment, because that's how Mesa works. But in either case, if you wanted to fit EL34s, what you'd do is you'd fit the tubes and flip it across to there. And if you want 6L6s, you fit the tubes and flip it across to there. I mean, how difficult does it have to be? Bias settings must match the tube in use. Well, they should, yeah. Or you could have fun. Well, the point is, you're really buying tubes as selected to just plug in and work with these bias settings. Now, you can get tubes from other people, other than Mesa Boogie, where you can plug them straight in and they'll work and all that stuff. But I've always felt myself that if you get the maker's tubes, you're probably doing well with that, because this maker knows what he's doing. There's no ifs or buts or, oh, these will do. That doesn't work in Mesa Boogie land, I don't think. Well, it doesn't where I come from. It might where you come from. I don't know. Let's move along a bit. We've got a rectifier select section there, and we can flip between diode or tube tracking for channel 1, channel 2 and channel 3, and you can just have them on any channel what you want it on. So do I actually use the rectifier tracking, the tube tracking? Personally I don't. I think it doesn't sound as good, but you might like it, I don't know. It says here, best to use tube tracking with EL34s. That's what it says. So fancy that, they're all set up for 6L6. Got the main power section, whether it's bold or whether it's spongy. Now if you watched my previous videos, as I've said, they're down below for the triple rectifier. You can learn a bit about this because the voltages can be taken up on the one that I had on the triple rec way above 280 volts from a 240 volt input, or down to near enough 200 volts when it's in spongy mode. And on that old amp, that spongy mode and that reduction of voltage affected the switching of the channels on the foot switch. So as long as you didn't switch it here into spongy mode, well, you wouldn't have any trouble. But it's not supposed to do that, is it? It's supposed to just work. Well, it doesn't just work, so bear that in mind. That's very important, and do bear in mind that when it's pushed across the board, that you are pushing the amp further with higher voltages than, well, really, not what they're designed for, but higher voltages than the mains that's coming in, it appears. Lastly, we've got the mains in, and we've got on this one, it says 240 volts, notice 240 volts, and the fuse type, and the others are unticked. There's your fuse, and we've got the important CE Rush compliance, and I think somebody was telling me that's a Canadian one. Well, it might be. Now these might vary dependent on what country they're sending the amp out to, so if yours are different, don't worry too much, but I'll be pretty sure that anything from Mesa Boogie is generally compliant. Okay, a quick look around the front. It must be one of the most long-standing amp fronts out there. Yeah, it's changed a little bit over the years, so we'll cover it anyway. Okay, so we've got the power on, and we've got a standby on, and we've got the proverbial red switch, light, that is, to show you it's turned on. Dual rectifier, 100 watt head, register trademark, once again, just down there where you can't see it, but don't worry about that. And then we've got this loop active section here, which covers the solo volume and the output of the loop. Looks just like the others, but I do believe that this has been changed a bit internally on these later models. We'll find out later. Now what you've got here is a typical channel settings, control should I say really. We've got presence, master, gain, bass, middle and treble. Now these amps can be a little bit hairy when it comes down to setting different settings. You can see on this one the bass is cranked up a bit there, and it's not always necessary to have the bass too high, and in the same context it's not always necessary to crank the treble all the way up because you don't like it sometimes. But you'll see more of that later on. We've got two little switches down here, one of which is going back a long way, I guess. Now this is for setting the mode of the channel. So we've got raw, vintage and modern. And if I was to go to even my my Road King 2, it's exactly the same switch, raw, vintage and modern. Modern brings it into the rectifier that you, I am sure, have heard a million times. But my personal favourite actually is the vintage mode. It has a very nice lead guitar on the Road King 2, on channel 3, but there's 4 channels on that one, in the vintage mode. So very useful, you'll hear it later. And we've got the switch down below, which whips this channel, think of this as being a channel, from 100 watt to 50 watt. Now you might say to me, Tony, yeah, well that's all well and good, but the 50 watts, you know, there's hardly any difference between 50 and 100 watt. Well, that could be a true statement actually. It's, you know, when you switch these amps to 50 watt, they can be still near enough as loud. As far as you are concerned and I'm concerned, you know, the layman, yeah, it's nearly the same. That's the common phrase. But the fact is that when you flip this down to reach 50 watts, you can drive this harder, this channel. So it does make a big difference. And this is very similar to what was on the, all the way back to the 290, yeah, the power amp that was the preferred one for the tri-axis. So when you shut that down and you cranked the preamp and the rest of it, it did sound good. You could really drive that channel, whereas the other channels that way were more laid back. You know, if you wanted a lot of headroom, you'd leave channel 1 on 100, for example. Here's a quick shot of the middle one, channel 2. I'm not going to talk about it because it's identical to this one down here that you've just looked at. We'll go along and have a look at the first channel. Here we are on channel 1, and it's virtually identical to the other two, except if you notice up here that this first switch only has 2 positions, either clean or pushed. And pushed gives it a bit more break up and less headroom type of thing. But when it's on clean, it's absolutely pristine. And if you was to leave this on 100 watt and clean, you can get it just about as clean as, well, you'd ever want, I guess, for a type of guy that uses these sort of amps. Yeah, 100 watt, 50 watts identical to the rest, and so are these other settings here. They're all pretty much of a much. Set according to taste, basically. And lastly, we've got the input. I could have gone this way, I could have, don't worry, that's the input for your guitar. Well, that covers the inside and the outside of the Mesa Boogie Dual Rectifier 100 watt head, multi-watt, and I think it's an excellent looking amp. You can see right off that, you know, some people would argue or disagree with me. I know Guitarologist, he doesn't like Mesa amps, but well, does he play them? I mean, he might not, who knows. Nice guy, good guy. There's a lot of stuff on his channel as well. I watch that off and on. But basically, I like Mesa Boogies. I always have. They've always provided me with what I've always wanted. They've always had the drive I've needed. They've always had the flexibility. And I've had lots of these different Mesa amps. And they've always been pretty reliable. Except for that last one, that triple rectifier. But that had been hammered to hell when I bought it. £1,000 as well in England for a naffed up piece of junk basically at the time. It's not a piece of junk now. But I bought this one because it's multi-watt. I've never had a multi-watt dual rec ever. So sounds like a plan. I'm going to put this back in its case and then we can carry on. And one thing I did want to cover just quickly as we're passing is these screws here. The point is they were often longer screws and they were made of like a soft steel and used to bend so easy. These days they're shorter and yeah, much improved. Well, there you have it. That's the inside and the controls of the Mesa Dual Rectifier multi-watt. Yeah, you also get a few other things with the amp. Let's run through them quickly. You get a very nice cover for the foot pedal. Throw that over there. You get a manual, and in this case it's the export one, and you also get some very nice felt pads for fitting underneath the feet, underneath the amp, if you're going to, you know, put it on something that you might have a wide speaker cab or something. Who knows? Who knows what you've got? But you know, and they provide them very kindly, which they never provide them on the earlier stuff, and that's a fact. So you get the manual, which is also downloadable, by the way. Throw that down there too. And you get one of these. You always get one of these with a Mesa amp, and I like to see this. Yeah, there it is. It tells you all about it. The serial number, the model, the this, the that. Everything you'd really want to know. But more importantly, it's a bit like the Marshall one, but it's even more involved than the Marshall one as I remember it. They're all squiggles, so what can I say? We've got a play test, so it has been played, and packaging is chank, inspection and assembly. So all very nice. What I like to also see is the made in Petaluma, California, with the world's finest materials on there. That's nice. Yeah, and it says here on the other side, which I'm not going to show you, it says custom amplifier since 1969. We've also got the pedal, the floor unit. Now they haven't got a model number on this one. Whatever they call it, whatever they call it. But there it is. It's sort of similar to the one that I had on the triple rec, but different. I dare say you could probably plug this one in and it'd work. I also can tell you it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wires for the connection between the amp and this. Some have 8. So it's got the usual stuff, channel 1, channel 2, channel 3. It's got a mute, which I like, didn't have that on the other amps. It's got a loop. Don't go and hit the wrong one, will you, in your solo. It's got a loop switch and it's got a solo switch. All the rest of it's, well, all the same. And this one, I would say is made of an alloy. It just looks that way. Okay, so it's a quick look inside. Well, there it is. You can see very clearly that you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 chips at least. You've got the socket on the end, and you've got the switches mounted directly to the PCB, pretty much like in my previous video of the triple rectifier. It's very similar inside, very similar indeed. So that's the pedal. Not much more you can say really. You do also get a mains lead. There it is, for your country. And it's got the usual Mesa Boogie caution on it. And you do get the lead, which in this case, like I said, is a 7-pin cable for the foot switch. I was just looking through the manual and it harps on about the Dual Rec being made in 1990 and this amp being made 20 years later, which makes it 2010. I guess there's a few things that have changed since then, but what they are, who knows. From the time they did the mods for the switching and the rest and updated this amp, it became a very different amp, I guess. Some guys will tell you that it sounds different. It might do to them. It might sound different to you. But at the end of the day, I reckon it sounds pretty much like a dual rectifier. Now in this amp, pretty much like most of the other Mesa Boogie amps I've ever seen, or at least the manuals should I say, they usually have some guidelines to get you going, because setting one of these up wrong, you can get some pretty weird, well, pretty non-standard tones, let's put it that way, and they're not what you might expect. And I've heard of guys fumbling around, for want of a better phrase, for a long time trying to get the tones that they want, that they think are inside this amp. They may or may not be, and they never really achieve it. I know on the triple rec, a lot of guys talk like that, like I've said earlier in the video, and I was one of them. And there were ways of fixing that, of course, as there are in most of these things, but it's all subjective, isn't it? Coming back to the manual, they do cover, like I said, they cover a lot of ground with the Mesa amp that some people wouldn't be familiar with. Yeah, I know, it's been around since 1990, but just trust me on this, everybody is not an expert on a dual rectifier, even today in 2021. They're not. Some people have never even played one now then. Now that's a scary thought, but that's a fact. I did just want to cover the aspect of that loop. Now, honestly, the number of guys that have sent me emails or contacted me via my website over the years, I did a piece on the loop of a triple rectifier, but I'm pretty sure it was in parallel on that thing, and it was never right, it never was. But on this one, just looking quickly, as I thought, the effects loop of your Recto is probably one of the most comprehensive loops. It's wired in series to the dry signal and is comprised of 5 elements, 4 on the rear panel, 1 on the front. Well, the fact is, it's switched from parallel to series then, hasn't it? Oh, I'm wrong. Well, it's what it says. What I like about this manual is they also have a quick section so you can see what tube's what and where it is and where it goes and all that sort of stuff. You know, if you're not familiar with them, it's an important aspect that many people overlook. And as for setting up speakers, you've got page after page, literally after page of speaker setups. Oh, it's gone. Thank God for that. Another thing I like, if you look at the back of the manual, it's got all the part numbers for the pots in case any fail. What a great thought. You know, the thought that's gone into that, I haven't seen that on any other manufacturer. Now moving across to warranty, it's all a bit vague unless you go on their site. There's nothing in the manual, at least not the manual that this came with, about warranty, and there's nothing on the supplier's documentation either. But I think it's 3 years, but it could be 5. Yeah, it's something like that. It's not 1 year, I'm pretty sure of that. But the tubes are like 90 days or something like that. Yeah, not very long, but that's common throughout the sector, isn't it? So, summing up, what do I think? Well, over the years, I've never really been disappointed with Mesa Boogie amps, except maybe the last one, that triple rectifier that I bought second hand and somebody messed around and faffed around with. Yeah, so can I hold it against Mesa Boogie? No, I really can't. What I didn't like too much was the fact that they discontinued the power transformer for that particular amp. I wonder when they'll discontinue it for this, bearing in mind that they're now owned by Gibson. That's a whole new ball game. Yeah, but this amp, you know, I've mentioned Badlander. Yeah, I haven't got my hands on one yet because nobody's got any. Usual rubbish. So I can't really demo it for you. I've demoed similar amps with IRs in and load boxes in the back and all that usual sort of junk that you think you need, but necessarily you may not. And it just adds extra complication to an amplifier. And there are more things to fail. And for the benefit of that, you pay more. So what do I think about the Badlander and buying this when I did? The Badlander is probably about to touch down any month. So why did I buy this? Well, there's a very good reason, and the very good reason is this thing here, it's been the sound. It's the sound. It's synonymous with metal, but it's also synonymous with rock, blues. Yeah, you can get blues out of this, of course you can. It's got every facet, except for MIDI, that you might ever want. And that makes it's an icon. That's what this is. Oh, the Badlander. Well, that isn't anything. It's got a sticker on the front that says rectifier, but that's not this rectifier. It's that rectifier, the one that you haven't tried yet. What if you don't like it when you buy it? What if this? What if that? What if you can't stand IRs? What if you don't You get the idea. With this, oh, you know exactly what you're buying. You know exactly what you're getting when you buy one of these. No ifs, no buts, no ahs. And I think most people would say that, yeah, it's a quality product, it's been around a long time, it's tried and tested, and it's going to do exactly what it says on the tin. And it is. Well, it's aluminium, not tin. So for me, well, I bought this one. I wanted the multi-watt thing, because I've had something like that on a tri-axis 290 amp, and that worked well for me back in the day. So that's the idea of this one. I'll probably sell the other one that I refurbished and make a big loss, but that's just life. So how would I rate this? Well, for me, I'd rate it at about a 9. What do you mean, Tony? It's not a 10? No, it's not a 10. I'd rate it at 9 because it's got no MIDI. And you might say to me, oh yeah, but everybody doesn't use MIDI. It's just an accessory, just an extra. Well, no, it's not an extra. What it is, it's a way of getting rid of, well, 30 or 40-year-old switches that are on the back with sockets. That's terrible. It was terrible when it came out, it's terrible now. I can cover what I like. I like the sounds. I like the look. I like the fact that it's 3-channel. I like that I can switch it into this 50-watt mode so I can drive the rest of it. I don't like raw much, but that's just me. I think vintage is the best on there, and as for modern, well, again, for some guys it's perfect. I like the fact that they've changed the loop from how it was in, quote, the old days. I really like that. What else do I like? Well, everything else is so-so. It's so much the same of the same. What don't I like? Well, I don't like no MIDI, like I said. I don't like Tracina bias on it, to tell you the truth, because as it stands at the moment, you're sort of locked in to either Mesa or some guy who claims he's doing the same settings for the tubes. I can't trust most of them. Yeah, I can't do that. What else don't I like? I don't like the price. But I would say that. Anyway, I got this one cheaper because the guy was selling it second hand, but it's a month old, like I said, so I'm not that concerned about that. There's one more thing I don't like on it, which I'd like to have, but I don't have, and maybe I'm going to do this as an exercise on either this one or the triple that I refurbed. I'd like these knobs to be gold. Match me teeth. So I've covered most of the inside and out on this, and well, we're going to hear it next. Yeah. Don't forget to visit my website, www.tonymackenzie.com. There's a link down there in the text, as there is for a load of stuff all about this Mesa Boogie stuff. So you do want to go down there and you do want to have a look. Yeah, lots of it. Don't forget to do the thumbs up, because apparently I need that these days. And you know, if you want to subscribe, do. Nobody else does reviews quite the same as I'm doing them. I'm not the best player in the world, but I'm neither an idiot as well. You know, I'm sort of in the middle. So I'm probably like you, and that matters. I'm not getting paid to do these reviews, and that also matters, because all the ones where somebody's getting something for nothing, or they're getting paid, or they're selling the amp, or they this, or they that, all of those, well, to be honest, you might want to discount those sort of reviews. They're not genuine. So from here on, we get out in the studio. I'm going to run through a few of the settings so you get an idea of what these settings are like. In particular, the 50-100, above anything else really, because a lot of people have seen all this other stuff. It would be nice to be able to show you the 50 and 100 watt settings. I'm not sure anybody shows you. Yeah, they like that. And then maybe I'll play a track or two. So, that's it for now. Check out all them other Mesa reviews down below. There are a few, Mark 5s, all that sort of stuff. And I'll see you next time. So get out of here. Well, here we are out in the studio, and here it is, the Dual Rectifier, 100 watt head, multi-watt. Yeah, it's plugged in. It's on a 1960A Marshall cab, which is fine for what I need. I've got a super chorus for the clean, maybe. I don't think there'll be any clean more. Oh my god. And I've got a microphone down there that's like two microphones, and yeah, they sort of split apart. Don't worry about it too much because it doesn't really matter. It'll be going off into the desk and then thrown over the top of the video, assuming I get a track out of it. I'm not going to spend all day on the, to be honest, on the Mesa Boogie Dual Rectifier tones, because scarily you've heard them since 1993. Okay, well, we've got a few simple tones off each channel, but I'm not going to go and spend hours putting driving on the back and the loop and that sort of, all them things that make one of these amps a damn sight nearer what you'd expect it to be. I'm just going to set it at what I like, because it's my amp. And let you have a listen at that, just a few chords, and then I'll play a track which is a sort of backing track type of thing, but it's more metalized than some of them. Yeah, it probably sounds like all my other tracks, but that's just live. Okay, well, first one's just the clean channel. It's set on its cleanest mode, and I've just got the controls where I think they sound alright. That's about it really. So if you just have a listen to the few chords. Well, you get an idea of that. I mean, it's as clean as it can get, isn't it? And for the clean boys out there, I just thought I'd put a bit of chorus on it, you know, type of thing. And yeah, it sounds very much like every other amp. It's clean, but it is clean. Well, this is set up on channel 2 in the sort of vintage mode that I tend to like myself. I don't know. I'm not changing anything on the guitar or anything like that. It's just clean, well, it's just raw Mesa Boogie, and I don't mean the raw channel. When it all comes down to it, you want that sort of top mode and top channel, don't you? If you get what I mean. And it's pretty aggressive. Of course it is. Similar type of stuff. I mean, you can get your detuning and the rest going on this, no problem. But what I would say is that the amp can actually play multitudes of styles. Everybody thinks it's purely a metal amp, but far from it actually. Anyway, that's enough of all this. Let's let's get back to some music.